I'm taking a break from the cryptids, portals, and the trail cam saga, just for a second, to talk about something that I find so incredibly fascinating. I came across a research paper a few years ago, and I don't even remember what led me to it, but the information it contained totally blew my mind. So this paper is about heart transplant recipients taking on certain characteristics of their donors, like food preferences, sexuality. Their interests change so dramatically in some cases, and the changes have been known to align with the preferences and interests of their donors. Now, what's more, the recipients were even able to access memories from their donor's life, as well as know things like their names and the manner of death. They knew these things independent of any source outside of them giving them the information. They knew it intrinsically. In other words, it was inherent knowledge. All they knew initially was the age and sex of their donor. The writers of the paper hypothesized that these post-op personality changes could be due to something known as cellular memory. And they discuss how dynamical systems theory could be applied here to help us better understand how these characteristics and memories are transferred from donor to recipient. The authors of the paper interviewed 10 recipients, their family members, and the family members of donors. They took the audio taped interviews done with these patients and transcribed those, word for word. Now I'm going to share those stories with you, and after I've shared them, we will discuss potential implications and some patterns I noted. This is going to sound like a work of fiction, but I can assure you it is not. Some of these stories are heartbreaking. Some might make you cry, others will make you furious, but I have no doubt that each and every one of them will leave you awestruck. Donor 1. The donor was an 18-year-old boy killed in an automobile accident. The recipient was an 18-year-old girl diagnosed with endocarditis and subsequent heart failure. The donor's father was a psychiatrist. My son always wrote poetry. We had waited more than a year to clean out his room after he died. We found a book of poems he had never shown us, and we've never told anyone about them. One of them has left us shaken, emotionally and spiritually. It spoke of his seeing his own sudden death. He was also a musician, and we found a song he titled, "Danny, My Heart Is Yours." The words were about how my son felt he was destined to die and give his heart to someone. He had decided to donate his organs when he was 12 years old. We thought it was quite strange, but maybe something they were talking about in school at the time. When we met his recipient, we didn't know what it was. We don't know now. We just don't know. The recipient reported, "When they showed me pictures of their son, I knew him directly. I would have picked him out of anywhere. He is in me. I know he is in me. And he is in love with me. He was always my lover. Maybe in another time somewhere, in a past life. How could he know years before he died that he would die and give his heart to me? How would he know my name is Danielle? And then, when they played me some of his music, I could finish the phrases of his songs. I could never play before, but after my transplant, I began to love music. I felt it in my heart. My heart had to play it. I told my mom I wanted to take guitar lessons, the same instrument Paul had played. His song is in me. I feel it a lot at night, and it's like Paul is serenading me." The recipient's father reported, "My daughter, she was what you say, a hellraiser, until she got sick. They say from a dentist they think she was the wild one. Then she became quite quiet. I thought it was her illness, but she said she felt more energy, not less. She said she wanted to play an instrument and she wanted to sing. When she wrote her first song, she sang about her new heart as her lover's heart. She said her lover came to save her life. Donor 2. The donor was a 16-month-old boy who drowned in a bathtub. The recipient was a 7-month-old boy diagnosed with tautology of Fallot, a hole in the ventricular septum with displacement of the aorta, pulmonary stenosis, and thickening of the right ventricle. The donor's mother is a physician. The first thing is that I could more than hear Jerry's heart, and Jerry being the donor. I could feel it in me. When Carter, the recipient, first saw me, he ran to me and pushed his nose against me and rubbed and rubbed. It was just exactly what we did with Jerry. Jerry and Carter's heart is 5 years old now, but Carter's eyes are Jerry's eyes. When he hugged me, I could feel my son. I could feel him. Not just symbolically. He was there. I felt his energy. I'm a doctor. I'm trained to be a keen observer and have always been a natural-born skeptic. But this was real. I know people will say that I need to believe my son's spirit is alive, and perhaps I do. But I felt it. My husband and my father felt it. And I swear to you, and you can ask my mom, Carter said the same baby talk words that Jerry said. Carter is 6, but he was talking Jerry's baby talk and playing with my nose just like Jerry did. We stayed with the recipient family that night. In the middle of the night, Carter came in and asked to sleep with my husband and I. He cuddled up between us exactly like Jerry always did, and we both began to cry. Carter told us not to cry because Jerry said everything was okay. My husband, I, our parents, and those who really knew Jerry have no doubt. Our son's heart contains much of our son, and it beats in Carter's chest. On some level, our son is still alive. The recipient's mother reported, I saw Carter go to her. He never does that. He is very, very shy. But he went to her just like he used to run to me when he was a baby. When he whispered, "It's okay, Mama," I broke down. He called her mother. Or maybe it was Jerry's heart talking. And one more thing got to us. We found out, talking to Jerry's mom, that Jerry had mild cerebral palsy, mostly on his left side. Carter has stiffness and sometimes shaking on that same side. He never did as a baby, and it only showed up after the transplant. The doctors say it's probably something to do with his medical condition, but I really think there's more to it. One more thing I'd like you to know about. When we went to church together, Carter had never met Jerry's father. We came late, and Jerry's dad was sitting with a group of people in the middle of the congregation. Carter let go of my hand and ran right to that man. We were flabbergasted. How could he have known him? He ran up to him and said, "Daddy." Why did he call him Dad? He never did things like that. He would never let go of my hand in church, and he would never run to a stranger. When I asked him why he did it, he said he didn't. He said Jerry did, and he went with him. Donor 3. The donor was a 24-year-old female car accident victim. The recipient was a 25-year-old male graduate student suffering from cystic fibrosis who received a heart-lung transplant. The donor's sister reported, "My sister was a very sensual person. Her one love was painting. She was on her way to her first solo show at a tiny art shop when a drunk driver plowed into her. It's a lesbian art store and they support gay artists. My sister was not really very out about it, but she was gay. She said her landscape paintings were really representations of the mother or woman figure. She would look at a naked woman and paint a landscape from that. Can you imagine? She was gifted." The recipient reported, "I never told anyone at first, but I thought having a woman's heart would make me gay. Since my surgery, I've been more sexually turned on than ever, and women just seem to look even more erotic and sensual. So I thought I might have gotten internal transsexual surgery. My doctor said it was just my new energy and my new lease on life, But I'm different. I know I'm different. I make love like I know exactly how the woman's body feels and responds. It's almost as if it's my body. I have the same body, but I still think I've got a woman's way of thinking about sex now. The recipient's girlfriend reported. He is a much better lover. Of course, he was weaker before, but it's not that. He just knows my body as well as I do. He wants to cuddle, he wants to hold me and take a lot of time. Before, he was a good lover, but not like this. It's just different. He wants to hug all the time and go shopping. My God, he never wanted to shop. And you know what? He carries a purse now, his purse. He slings it over his shoulder and calls it his bag, but it's a purse. He hates it when I say that. But going to the mall with him is like going with one of the girls. And one more thing, he loves to go to museums. He would never, absolutely never have done that before. Now he would go every week. Sometimes he stands for minutes and looks at a painting without saying a word. He loves landscapes and he'll just stare. I often will walk off and leave him and just come back later. Donor 4. Before I get into this one, I want to preface it by saying this was 1999, and you will absolutely notice that there is some hardcore ignorance in this report, but keep in mind that it is just ignorance. I don't think the intention is hate, but just try to remain neutral. The donor was a 17-year-old black male student victim of a drive-by shooting. The recipient was a 47-year-old white male factory worker who was diagnosed with aortic stenosis. The donor's mother reported, "Our son was walking to violin class when he was hit. Nobody knows where the bullet came from. It just hit him and he fell. He died right there on the street, hugging his violin case. He loved music, and his teachers said he had a real thing for it. He would listen to music and play along with it. I think he would have been at Carnegie Hall someday. But the other kids, they always made fun of the music he liked." The recipient reported, "I'm real sad and all for the guy who died and gave me his heart, but I really have trouble with the fact that he was black. I'm not a racist, mind you, not at all. Most of my friends at the plant are black guys. But the idea that there's a black heart in a white body seems really, well, I don't know. I told my wife that I thought my penis might grow to a black man's size. They say black men have larger penises, but I don't know for sure. After we have sex, I sometimes feel guilty because a black man made love to my wife. But I don't really think that, not seriously. I can tell you one thing, though. I used to hate classical music, but now I love it. So I know it's not my new heart because a black guy from the hood wouldn't be into that. But it calms my heart. I play it all the time. I more than like it. I play it all the time. I didn't tell any of the guys on the line that I have a black heart, but I think about it a lot." The recipient's wife reports, "He was really concerned about the idea when he heard it was a black man's heart. He actually asked me if he could ask the doctor for a white heart when one came up. He's no Archie Bunker, but he's pretty close to it. And he would kill me if he knew I told you this. But for the first time, he's invited his black friends over from work. It's like he doesn't see the color anymore, even though he still talks about it sometimes. He seems more comfortable and at ease with these black guys, but he's not even aware of it. And one more thing I wanted to say. He's driving me nuts with the classical music. He doesn't know the name of a single song and never, ever listened to it before. But now, he sits for hours and listens. He even whistles classical music songs that he could never know. How does he know them? You'd think he'd like rap music or something because of his black heart." Donor 5. The donor was a 19-year-old woman killed in an automobile accident. The recipient was a 29-year-old woman diagnosed with cardiomyopathy secondary to endocarditis. The donor's mother reported, "My Sarah was the most loving girl. She owned and operated her own health food restaurant, and she scolded me constantly about not being a vegetarian. She was a great kid. Wild, but great. She was into the free love thing and had a different man in her life every few months. She was man crazy from the time she was a very little girl, and it just never stopped. She was able to write some notes to me when she was dying. She was so out of it, but she kept saying how she could feel the impact of the car hitting them. She said she could feel it going through her body. The recipient reported, "You can tell people this if you want, but it will make you sound crazy. When I got my new heart, 2 things happened to me. First, almost every night, and still sometimes now, I actually feel the accident my donor had. I can feel the impact in my chest. It slams into me. But my doctor said everything looks fine. Also, I hate meat. I can't stand it. I used to be McDonald's biggest moneymaker, and now meat makes me want to throw up. Actually, when I even smell it, my heart starts to race. But that's not the big deal. My doctor said that's just due to my medicines. I couldn't tell him, but what really bothers me is that, well, I'm engaged to be married. He's a great guy and we love each other. The sex is amazing. But I'm gay. At least I thought I was. After my transplant, I'm not. I don't think anyway. I'm sort of semi or confused gay. I don't know. Women still seem attractive to me, but my boyfriend turns me on. Women don't. I don't have any desire whatsoever to be with a woman. I think I really got a gender transplant." The recipient's brother reported, "Susie's straight now. I mean it, seriously. She was gay, and now her new heart made her straight. She threw out all her books and stuff about gay politics, and she never talks about it anymore. She was really militant about it before. She holds hands and cuddles with Steven, just like my girlfriend does with me. She talks girl talk with my girlfriend, where before she would be lecturing about the evils of sexist men. And my sister, the queen of the Big Mac, hates meat. She won't even have it in the house." Donor 6. The donor was a 14-year-old girl injured in a gymnastics accident. The recipient was a 47-year-old man diagnosed with benign myxoma and cardiomyopathy. The donor's mother reported, "Look at her." Holds up a picture. "My daughter was the picture of health. There wasn't an ounce of fat on her. She was a gymnast, and her coach could lift her above his head with one hand. She was so excited about life that she would just hop and jump all the time like a little kitten. She did have some trouble with food. She would skip meals, and for a while she was purging. I think they would probably call her a little anorexic. We took her to therapy about it, but she just wasn't much into food. And she had this silly little giggle. When she got embarrassed, it sounded like a little bird." The recipient reported, "I feel new again. I feel like a teenager. I actually feel giddy. I know it's just the energy of the new heart, but I really feel younger in every way, not just physically. I just see the world in a different way, like I'm really young at heart. I have this annoying tendency to giggle that drives my wife nuts. And there's something about food. I don't know what it is. I get hungry, but after I eat, I feel really nauseated and think that it would probably help if I could just throw up." The recipient's brother reported, "Gus is a teenager, no doubt about that. He's a kid, or at least he thinks he's a kid. Even when we're bowling, he yells and jumps around like a fool. He's got this weird laugh now. It's a girl's laugh, and we tell him that, but he doesn't care. His appetite never did bounce back after the surgery. He's pretty much nauseated almost all the time. After Thanksgiving dinner, he went upstairs and vomited. We took him to the emergency room, but it wasn't anything to do with his new heart. They said it was probably a reaction to something in the meal. None of the rest of the family got sick, though. I tell you what, he's going to have to watch it. His doctor is really concerned about his weight." Donor 7. The donor was a 3-year-old girl who drowned in the family pool. The recipient was a 9-year-old boy diagnosed with myocarditis and septal defect. The recipient's mother about the donor. He, the recipient, doesn't know who his donor was or how she died. We do. She drowned at her mother's boyfriend's house. Her mother and her boyfriend left her with a teenage babysitter who was on the phone when it happened. I never met her father, but the mother said they had a very ugly divorce and that the father never saw his daughter. She said she worked a lot of hours and wished she had spent more time with her. I think she feels pretty guilty about it all. You know, the both of them sort of not appreciating their daughter until it was too late. The recipient reported. I talk to her sometimes. I can feel her in there. She seems very sad. She's so afraid. I tell her it's okay, but she's still very afraid. She said she wishes that parents wouldn't throw away their children. I don't know why she would say that. The recipient's mother about the recipient. The one change I have noticed is that Jimmy is now deathly afraid of water. He loved it before. We live on a lake, but he won't even go out in the backyard. He keeps closing and locking the back door. He says he's afraid of the water and doesn't know why, and he will not talk about it. Donor 8. The donor was a 19-year-old woman who suffered a broken neck in dance class. The recipient was a 19-year-old woman diagnosed with cardiomyopathy. The donor's mother reported, "We've met Angela, the recipient, and she is the image of our daughter Stacy. They could almost be twins. They're both bright girls. I mean, my daughter was bright too. She wanted to be an actress, but we thought she had way too much academic potential for that. Her father is a doctor and really wanted her to follow in his footsteps." The donor's father reported, "Stacy was extremely bright. It's so tragic. She would have made an outstanding physician. But she wanted to dance and sing. That's how she died. She fell in dance class. We always argued, good-naturedly of course, about how disappointed I would be if she went to Hollywood instead of Harvard. I hope she knew I just wanted her to be happy." The recipient reported, "I think of her as my sister. I'm certain we must have been sisters in a former life. I only know my donor was a girl my age, but it's more than that. I talk to her at night, or when I'm sad. I can feel her answering me. I can feel it in my chest. I put my left hand there and press it with my right. It's like I can connect with her. Sometimes she seems sad. I think she wanted to be a nurse or something, but other times it's like she wanted to be on Broadway. I think she wanted to be on Broadway more. I want to be a nurse, but I could be a doctor too. I hope she'll be happy because she will always be my angel, my sister in my chest." The recipient's mother reported, "We can sometimes hear her talking to her heart. It's like a Dear Diary thing. She puts her hand on her chest and talks to who she thinks her donor is. Once, we found her holding a stethoscope to her chest to try to hear her new heart. I think she still does this sometimes. And the only other thing is she really wants to go to medical school now. She never wanted to do that before, but that's probably because she didn't think she would live." Case 9. The donor was a 3-year-old boy who fell from an apartment window. The recipient was a 5-year-old boy with septal defect and cardiomyopathy. The donor's mother reported, "It was uncanny. When I met the family and Daryl, the recipient, at the transplant meeting, I burst into tears. We went up to the giving tree where you hand a token symbolizing your donor. I was already crying when my husband told me to look at the table we were passing. It was the donor family with Daryl sitting there. I knew it right away. Daryl smiled at me exactly like Timmy, the donor, did. After we talked for hours with Daryl's parents, we were comforted. It somehow just didn't seem strange at all after a while. When we heard that Daryl had made up the name Timmy and got his age right, we began to cry. But they were tears of relief, because we knew that Timmy's spirit was alive." The recipient reported, I gave the boy a name. He's younger than me, and I call him Timmy. He's just a little kid. He's like a little brother, like about half my age. He got hurt real bad when he fell down. He likes Power Rangers a lot, I think, just like I used to, but I don't like them anymore. I like Tim Allen on Tool Time, so I called him Tim. I wonder where my old heart went to. I sort of miss it. It was broken, but it took care of me for a while. The recipient's father reported, Daryl never knew the name of his donor or his age. We didn't know either until recently. We just learned that the boy who died had fallen from a window. We didn't even know his age until now. Daryl had it about right. Probably just a lucky guess or something, but he got it right. What is spooky, though, is that he not only got the age right and some idea of how he died, he got the name right. The boy's name was Thomas, but for some reason his immediate family called him Tim. The recipient's mother reported, Are you going to tell them the real Twilight Zone thing? Timmy fell trying to reach a Power Ranger toy that had fallen on the ledge of the window. Daryl won't even touch his Power Rangers anymore. Case 10. The donor was a 34-year-old police officer shot attempting to arrest a drug dealer. The recipient was a 56-year-old college professor diagnosed with atherosclerosis and ischemic heart disease. The donor's wife reported, When I met Ben, the recipient, and Casey, I almost collapsed. First, it was a remarkable feeling seeing the man with my husband's heart in his chest. I think I could almost see Carl, the donor, in Ben's eyes. When I asked Ben how he felt, I think I was really trying to ask Carl how he was. I wouldn't say that to them, but I wish I could have touched Ben's chest and talked to my husband's heart. What really bothers me, though, is when Casey said offhandedly that the only real side effect of Ben's surgery were flashes of light in his face. That's exactly how Carl died. The bastard shot him right in the face. The last thing he must have seen is a terrible flash. They never caught the guy, but they think they know who it is. I've seen the drawing of his face. The guy has long hair, deep eyes, a beard, and this real calm look. He looks sort of like some of the pictures of Jesus. The recipient reported, If you promise you won't tell anyone my name, I'll tell you what I've not told any of my doctors. Only my wife Casey knows. I only knew that my donor was a 34-year-old very healthy guy. A few weeks after I got my heart, I began to have dreams. I would see a flash of light right in my face, and my face gets real hot. It actually burns. Just before that time, I would get a glimpse of Jesus. I've had these dreams and now daydreams ever since. Jesus and then a flash. That's the only thing I can say is something different, other than feeling really good for the first time in my life. The recipient's wife reported, I am very glad you asked him about his transplant. He is more bothered than he'll tell you about these flashes. He says he sees Jesus and then a blinding flash. He told the doctors about the flashes, but not about Jesus. They said it's probably just a side effect of his medications. God, we wish they would stop. Yeah, so how incredible was that? Okay, since that paper was published, there have been a bunch of articles written about the potential for transplant recipients to take on aspects of their donors, and they pretty much mimic one another. There's nothing new written from article to article, but there are two theories other than the cellular memory theory. The first is kind of hilarious. It's called the hospital grapevine theory, and it states that patients may be influenced due to information they hear from nurses talking to each other or their surgeons while they are under anesthesia. Medical staff are strictly prohibited from telling a transplant recipient the identity of the donor or even any personal information, but there's not really a rule about talking amongst themselves. The problem I have with this is that even if a patient was highly suggestible, if they are under anesthesia, they are unconscious, and therefore any information recorded by the mind is done so by the subconscious mind. That doesn't even begin to explain all the conscious memories and experiences these patients were reporting. These parallels weren't manifestations of their subconscious mind. They were consciously aware of memories, names, manner of death. With all due respect, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. The second theory mentioned that side effects of immunosuppressive drugs could be responsible. This theory hypothesizes that the drugs have immunosuppressive and maybe, possibly, might also have psychoactive side effects. They're basically suggesting that the parallels between donor and recipient are coincidences being spouted by a patient experiencing a psychotic episode. Now, I want to point out how many times a patient described unusual symptoms that appear to be connected to the donor, and the doctor told him it was probably just a side effect of their medication. Think about all the trials that drugs have to go through before they're even available to the public. And then try and remember the last time you heard an advertisement for a new medication. The list of side effects takes up the majority of the advertisement. Medical professionals are well aware of the most common side effects. So to tell a patient it's probably a side effect of their medicine, can you imagine how that would go down in an advertisement for that medication, what that would sound like?
Side effects may include a song in your heart, mild cerebral palsy on your left side, a sudden and intense love of landscape paintings, a sudden and intense love of classical music, a change in sexual orientation, the development of an eating disorder, giggling like a little bird in men, sudden cravings for beer and fried chicken in women, a revulsion towards meat products, a revulsion towards Power Ranger toys, hydrophobia, hallucinations of Jesus that may or may not precede a sudden flash of light.
Now, regarding the transplant recipients assuming the personality of their donor, the United Kingdom National Organ Donation System released a statement. They said, "While we are aware of the suggestion that transplant recipients take on aspects of the personality of the organ donor, we are not aware of any evidence to support it. And, while not discounting it entirely, we have no reason to believe that it happens. We would be very interested to see any definitive evidence that supports it." There was another research paper written in 2018, and it was just a review of all the current literature. I'm going to link that in the description. It's a really good one. The perspective is balanced, and the author explains the concept of cellular memory, and even goes into a lot of other possible explanations, such as memory being stored in DNA, and the potential for the electromagnetic field produced by the heart to store information. I guess that would be the quantum theory, and in my opinion, that is the most plausible explanation. Considering transplant recipients don't lose their own memories when their old heart is discarded, they're still able to retain those, and perhaps there is a better explanation that is purely physical, but the law of polarity informs us that nothing is purely physical or non-physical. All things are both. So when I was doing the research for this, I found one other article worth mentioning. It was about the hearts of drug users needing to be considered as viable options for those on the transplant list, but only if there was no damage to the heart and it was a healthy heart. It discussed rise in deaths due to the opioid epidemic. One doctor said he felt like they were throwing away good hearts. And I mean, I guess in theory this seems great. It would make a lot more hearts available for transplantation, but knowing what we know about an eating disorder being transferred from donor to recipient, should we not seriously consider the moral implications of putting the heart of a drug addict into the body of someone else? I mean, I guess there's a chance that something much bigger is at play. Maybe it would give the spirit of the overdose victim a second chance to experience healing. But should a transplant recipient have the right to choose whether or not they are even willing to go through that, to kind of take that whole thing on? I don't know. I just like the questions.